I mean, is there anything better than a Hawaiian sweet roll with a nice thick smear of butter on that fucking thing? Jesus Christ. Just had a snack before I came in to start the show. Hi everybody. Oh, I forgot to crack open my Canada Dry sparkling seltzer. Hang on. There we go. See, I could keep it below the frame line and you all would think I was drinking a beer like a cool person, but nope. No, Jim, that is not my destiny. So, as usual, to all of you who are joining me in the live chat, thank you so very much for being here. And I will turn my attention to your questions in a little while. But first, I'm going to answer some questions that were pre-submitted by my Patreon patrons. So please be patient, those of you who are in the live chat and do not have a patron question in the hopper. I'll get to you as soon as I can, as soon as I get through the patron questions. And please, if you were planning on being generous today and giving me a super chat or anything like that, if possible, please hold off until I am paying attention to the live chat, because otherwise I am going to miss it. Because while I am answering patron questions, I am not looking at the live chat. So, just play nice while I'm answering patron questions, and I'll be with you in a few minutes. All right, let's go to the pre-submitted patron questions, and the first one is from Jan Beek EU, who says, "Hey Steve, quick and dirty, is it me or is it strange to you too how important money / Latinum became in Picard again?" I'll say this. I did notice it. I took note of the way that they were talking about money and how, like when Rios was introduced and he was like, "I'm very expensive." Yeah, that does seem unusual. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, Rios is no longer in Starfleet, and I would imagine that he, as a private ship captain, he does business with a lot of clients who are not from the Federation, who probably come from cultures that still use money. So Rios himself probably still uses money quite frequently, perhaps even more frequently than a typical Federation citizen would use money in their everyday lives. So if you think about it in that way, it's not that unusual. If you think of Rios as sort of an independent contractor who moves, sort of in between worlds and isn't strictly speaking a Starfleet person or a Federation person. So it makes sense. It does. When that occurred to me, it didn't really bother me that much, but I did notice it. And yeah, and also when Raffi is kind of giving Jean-Luc a hard time about how he went home to his vineyard and she's living here in a trailer, and there's more of a sense of class consciousness on Earth than there has been in Star Trek for a while. So yeah, I noticed it, and like I said, it never really bothered me, and I think when you think about it, it makes a little bit more sense and is not quite as much of a departure from established canon as it might have felt at first. But yeah, I definitely noticed it. I definitely noticed it. Next question is from Chucky Ronaldo. How do you think the post-series ending DS9 novels impact the overall story? Do you like them? If so, why? Well, I can't really say because I've never read them. My understanding is that since they did the relaunch of Deep Space Nine in the novels, that the status quo has been moved forward quite a bit from where it was at the end of the series. I think at this point there's even a new station, right? According to the most recently published books, didn't they destroy? They destroyed the original Deep Space Nine, and then they built a new Deep Space Nine. So in the novels, there's Deep Space Nine is a completely different station now than it was in the TV show. So that seems like an impact, but I can't speak to the quality of those books or to what impact they have had in that version of the Star Trek universe, because I've never read them, unfortunately. So wish I could tell you more. Wish I could have something more interesting to say, but I haven't read them, so I can't really say. Here's one from Riley Dosh. Have you considered doing a similar video to the Seven one, but about T'Pol? She seems to fit the archetype, much less the catsuit, that Seven was, without as much character development. I haven't specifically thought about doing a T'Pol video. But I certainly would not rule it out. I don't plan to stop making Trek Actually videos anytime soon. And if I can come up with what I think would be a good thesis, or an interesting way of approaching to Paul as a character, I'll certainly throw it up on a poll and see if my patrons vote for it. And if it wins the poll, I'll do it. I mean, I don't. It's not on my to-do list right now. I have a list in a document of dozens and dozens of potential topics for upcoming Trek Actually videos, and there isn't a T'Pol video on that list at the moment. But I could give it a think and come up with something. And if I come up with an interesting question or an interesting angle of her character, or an interesting angle of Star Trek or Enterprise in particular to explore through her character, I would certainly be up for doing that. But at the moment, no, I can't really think of what I would do a T'Pol video about, or and I don't have any plans at the moment to do that. But in the future, sure, absolutely. All right, here we go. Some random geek. He says, "Hey, Steve. Some patron hangout that was 2 Sundays ago. I did interrupt Joe, and I'm sorry to Joe about that. But so many things that Joe of the channel Serious Mind said that I have problems with. Socialism on paper is great, except every country that tries to implement socialism has utterly failed, to which I just quickly said disagree and left it at that. There are 8 of us in the hangout with you after all, but it is completely false that all attempts at socialist societies have failed. As one of my comrades posted on Facebook one time, examples of socialism working: Kibbutz, 1909 to present; Federation of Neighborhood Councils El Alto, Fajuve, 1979 to present; CIPO RFM, 1980s to present; MST, 1982 to present; Puerto Real, 1987 present; Spejano Albanese, I'm not sure how to pronounce that because I'm an ignorant American, 1992 to present; Rebel Zapatista Autonomous Municipalities, Manez, 1994 to present; Barbaca, 2001 to present; Zakila, 2006 to present; Sharon, 2011 to present; Democratic Federation of Northern Syria, Rojava, 2013 to present. Hopefully Rojava is okay. But since Trump pulled troops from Syria and Boris Johnson backs Turkey, saying they have legitimate security concerns, and the UK harassing and arresting volunteers who helped Rojava, I fear for the safety of comrades there. But even these Spanish anarchists within the CNT-FAI, they had a functioning society that starts in 1936 with the Spanish Revolution and did the best it could while fighting a war with the Spanish fascists of Franco. True, Franco took power in 1939 when he won, but even if it was brief, the Spanish anarchists, and in particular in Catalonia, proved that a libertarian socialist society can thrive, even under war times. Break everything we know about economics, politics, and human nature. Step Back History did a great video about it here. Steve, last Saturday when you joined us for Social Justice Alchemy, here's that stream, you asked us how would an anarchist society work. Researching Catalonia from 1936 to 1939, Rojava, the Zapatistas, or the other societies listed above would help answer that. And ultimately, how does an anarchist society work depends on the anarchist society themselves. Now imagine I bring all of this up with Joe on another patron hangout. How would that go over? Remember, I yelled, yes, I do want a revolution on patron hangout number 49, and how I was told, don't filibuster, which, true, I probably would have. This is important, or patron hangout 59, where I said the 2008 crash is just part of capitalism's boom and bust cycle. Doesn't it seem like some liberals are just anti-socialists, anti-communists, and anti-revolution? And why? After all, this is important, meaning what he had to say, as opposed to what I have to say was important. It is important not to have a revolution. I wonder what your patrons think are my reasons for a revolution. I don't think I have directly explained in those hangouts. Well, no, I don't remember if you have or not. And I suppose if you wanted to, if we were in a patron hangout at some point in the future and you wanted a few minutes to explain why you think it's important that we have a revolution as opposed to reforming the present system, I would be happy to give you that, and hopefully other people in the hangout would be willing to listen for a few minutes while you explained. But yeah, look, I think you're right in the sense that a lot of people are, if not anti-revolution, although you would probably call them anti-revolutionaries, they just don't see the need for a revolution. They don't see the necessity of it. And honestly, I'm one of those people. I mean, as I've said many times, I share the goals of most of my friends on the left in broad terms. I don't share the goal of getting rid of the state. I don't share the goal of a revolution in that way. But I share the goal of social equality and economic equality and taking care of those living in poverty and reducing or even eliminating poverty if possible and combating institutionalized racial discrimination and gender discrimination and religious discrimination. And I mean, there are all kinds of problems that we approach from different angles, and that we would like to see different solutions tried for. But we all agree that they are problems, and we have a lot of agreement and unity in that. But I stop short of saying we need a revolution, and I also, between the two of us, I think we we both would agree that we've never, like, saying we should have a revolution is a proposal, but it's not a plan. And if we're going to say let's throw the whole thing out, let's throw out the entire present system and start over from scratch, we would people like me, and I assume people like Joe, would want a little bit more detail than, well, let's have a revolution. And I'm not saying that there aren't details. I know that anarchist thinkers and revolutionary leftists have done a great deal of work on this over decades and decades. It's not as though there is that no leftist has any idea of how to go about having a revolution or what to do after the revolution. I'm not suggesting that. But in these sorts of conversations, that's how it often comes across. That it's just, we need to have a revolution, and it's like, okay, well, by what means, and then what happens after that, you know. But anyway, my VCam just restarted, so I'm afraid my audio might be out of sync for some people. So I'm going to drop out and come back in, and hopefully that will fix it for everybody. So I will be right back. Okay. Hopefully that's better. If any of you were getting out of sync audio, I know that happened on the last Facepalm 5 on Monday, and usually when I do what I just did, that fixed it. So hopefully that fixed it. Anyway, on to the next question. This is from Eric Byer. Do you have a tentative start date for the next season of Steve and Stuffy? I have better than a tentative start date. I have a pretty firm start date. The first Steve and Stuffy episode of 2020 will go up at the end of this month. It will go up Friday, March 27th. Yeah, three weeks from now. And there will be 4 episodes of Steve and Stuffy, starting with that March 27th episode. And then after that, the Whirlpool will come back for the second half of its season for another 12 weeks. And then there will be another 4-week run of Steve and Stuffy in the summer. And then there will be a 4-week break where I'll do something else on Fridays. I might put up different videos, or just not put up a video on Friday for a month. I'm not sure exactly what I'll do. But there will be a 4-week break, and then Steve and Stuffy will come back in the fall, starting on September 11th, and will run every Friday for the rest of the year. So that is the more than tentative. That is almost certainly going to be the schedule for Steve and Stuffy for the rest of the year. And I don't have any of it written yet in terms of actual scripts, but I have most of the season plotted out pretty specifically. So yeah, March 27th. Steve and Stuffy comes back for the first new episodes of the year. Next question is from Elvis Needs Boats. This may be covered by your upcoming Conservatives and Trek ep, but there's this trend I see with people who say Trek isn't a future to strive towards anymore. Specifically, I've seen the same clip from Red Letter Guys about a Space Abraham Lincoln episode that's the way Trek should be, brought up that hand waves racism, in my opinion. It seems like so many people don't actually want new things. Well, that last bit, I think you're right on about, and I do think that accounts for a great deal of the reluctance to embrace the newer Star Trek productions. I do think a lot of it is, well, that's not how I remember it, so therefore it's bad, or I'm not interested, or people watching Picard who are upset that it's not an 8th season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, even though Patrick Stewart and everyone else involved in it went out of their way to say this is not going to be like Next Gen. This is not going to be a reboot or a retread of Next Gen. And yeah, in terms of Starfleet or the Federation no longer being a society to aspire to, I mean, I've mentioned this before. I really don't. I don't see that. I don't get that. I think, yes, the Federation and Starfleet in Picard is being portrayed as a lot more fundamentally flawed than it has been before. The notion that Starfleet and the Federation would turn its back on rescuing the Romulans before the supernova and would not be doing as much as it could to help the Romulan refugees. That is the kind of thing that is surprising and shocking if we think about the Federation as it was in TNG. We couldn't imagine the Federation in TNG doing something like that. But then you start to think a little bit, and actually it's not that far out of character, because the Federation in the TNG era did give away a whole series of colonies to the Cardassians that were on the border of Federation and Cardassian space as a result of a peace treaty to end the war between the Federation and the Cardassian Union. And that giveaway of those planets that were home to thousands and thousands of Federation citizens is what gave rise to the Maquis, because those people felt like they had been totally screwed over by the Federation. So if you say, well, the Federation would never behave this way when you watch Picard, ask the people living on those colonies. I'm sure if they were real and they could speak, they would say, oh, I mean, I think they would do something like that because they did something like that to us. So it's not unprecedented to show the Federation or Starfleet as being capable of something like that. And as I have said many times before, in defense of Picard and in defense of showing the Federation to be not as perfect, not as utopian as it has previously appeared, that just makes it more useful for telling stories about our world today. And if Star Trek is not going to offer us political commentary that is challenging to us today and that addresses the problems that we have today in the world right now, then it is not doing as much good as it could or should do. So I'm completely on board with showing us a more flawed Federation, because that allows Star Trek to then tell stories that are a closer match to the world that we live in today. And even if that is the case, the Federation is still a superior society to the one we have. It's still something to aspire to. It still has no poverty. It still has no war internally. It still seems to be free or largely free of institutionalized discrimination. Again, internally. Obviously, they're discriminating against Romulans. So it's still a society that we should aspire to. It's still something that we can look to and say that is a hopeful future. The fact that it turns out that it is run by imperfect people and that it is still susceptible to bias and prejudice, and it still has the potential to fall short of its ideals, does not ruin the Federation for me at all. I think that's honest, and I think that's kind of a childish way to look at it, to be honest. People who say like, "Oh, we can't. They ruined the Federation. You can't aspire to the Federation." Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disillusion you that human nature means that we will probably never have a perfect utopian society, that even if we do get past many of our issues, that we will still always have the potential of backsliding. Like, that's just, I hate to be the one to tell you, but that's just the way it is. But I still think that the Federation society that we see in Star Trek, even in Picard, is something worth aspiring to, and is also a lot more useful for offering commentary on our present world. Andrew Michael says, howdy, Steve. Just want to say I loved the DCEU and Suicide Squad and B versus S in particular. Shazam, not so much. I think I figured out why more people don't like them after watching your Shazam review. I hate comic books. I like more realistic, which in my definition is bleak, dark, probably says more about me than anything else, interpretations of superheroes, like the first Iron Man movie. Many other people who seem to like the DCEU are also not fans of comics. I guess my question is, why would Warner Brothers, or whoever controls the DCEU, make the odd decision to make a bunch of superhero movies and tailor them towards people who don't like superhero comics? Or do you think I'm just a hopelessly broken and damaged person? With love, Andrew. Well, I mean, if you like Batman v Superman versus Shazam, then yeah, I really don't know if there's any hope for you at all. You know, it makes sense for a movie company to try and make superhero movies that appeal to people who don't read superhero comics, because if you only get people who read superhero comics, your movies are not going to be successful. That's just, I mean, the comic book business has been on a slow but steady decline, and sometimes not such a slow decline, for decades. The comic book business is in bad shape. And if you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make movies based on comic book characters, and you're only pulling in people who still read superhero comics to the theater, your movie is going to bomb. You're going to lose tremendous amounts of money, and you're just not going to make those movies anymore. So you have to attract. It's a reality of the marketplace. Unfortunately, you have to attract people other than the diehard comic book reading superhero fans. So in that sense, I think it's a very smart, savvy, and necessary thing. The problem that I have with the DCEU is the way they go about doing that. You know, it's not the fact that the movies are dark that I have a problem with, because there are comic books, superhero comic books, that are dark, that deal with adult themes, that are not for children, that are not the sort of feel-good, adventure-based, accessible stories that we see typically, for instance, in the Marvel movies. You know, there are plenty of superhero comics that are not like that at all, that are very grim and gritty. And I don't know if you could ever say realistic when you're talking about a superhero story, but you know what I'm saying. But there's a beauty to them. They have a sense of poetry and intelligence, something to say about the characters and the world. And they're just not as dark and grim and depressing and full of shit as most of the DCEU is, to me, to the way I see those movies. So it's not the fact that the DCEU movies are dark or whatever. It's the way they go about it. It's the fact that they're just boring and full of themselves and way too long and just not that fucking interesting. You know, like that, to me, that's the problem, not the fact that they're dark or whatever. You can perfectly fine to make a dark superhero movie. Not every superhero movie has to be like Shazam in order to make me happy. And you cite the first Iron Man movie, and I mean, I don't think that's that dark of a movie. I think the first Iron Man movie is a pretty good balance between you know, sort of a story with shades of darkness and shades of seriousness, and something that, you know, is more funny and lighthearted and adventurous. I think the first Iron Man movie is terrific too, and I wouldn't consider it to be all that dark of a movie. But you know, to each their own. But my problem with the DCEU is not the darkness; it's the other stuff I said. But trying to reach out to a broader audience, there's, you know, that's just common sense. Next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. I've got a bone to pick with the way you answered my question last stream. I got the impression that you just view it as the default that the rich pizza man gets to keep his big house. Like you said something like, I don't think we have to take his house, which implies unless we have a very good reason to take his house, we should just default to the position that he gets to keep it. I'm not sure I understand why that would be. I mean, ultimately, if the house is in North America, it's presumably on land that was stolen from Native Americans at some point. Yet for some reason, you think we should just default to the position that he gets to keep this land? Is it just that this is the status quo in our society right now, and drastically changing it, i.e. having a revolution, is so much harder and potentially more dangerous than doing reforms around the edges? If that's the case, I'm wondering if you'd feel different if the status quo of the society you live in was different. Like, let's say the U.S. collapses and the people of Hagerstown restore order by turning the town into a commune. Is a society like that, it wouldn't be the status quo that you just get to keep land you don't need? If you found yourself living in communist Hagerstown, would the question in your head go from, do we need to take his house, to, does he get to keep his house? Biden delenda est. I feel like Biden delenda est is taking it a little far. I don't want Biden to be the nominee either. I intend to vote for Sanders in my primary, but I would be much more comfortable with Trump delenda est than Biden delenda est. I don't think, I don't share your dire assessment of the situation. But the reason I say that I sort of default to let the rich guy keep his house is that the way I see it, if we tax the guy, if we tax the shit out of him and use the extra government income from those taxes to fund social programs, I'm not convinced that we need to take his house. I'm completely fine letting a rich person keep their nice house as long as they pay their fair share in taxes, which at the moment, most of them aren't. And I guess that's just a fundamental ideological difference between us. If we have a much, much, much more progressive tax system in this country than we have now, I'm not that bothered by rich people having big houses, as long as they are paying a very, very large percentage of their income in taxes. I'm fine with having rich people. I don't think that the mere existence of rich people is the problem. I think the fact that rich people have been allowed to hoard so much wealth that you have people now who earn more in a few minutes on the interest of their net worth than most working people can ever earn through their labor in their lifetimes. That's the problem. And we can alleviate a lot of the problems in terms of poverty and wealth inequality in this country, not by getting rid of rich people or confiscating their property, but by instituting a much more progressive tax code, a much more progressive hierarchy of taxation that redistributes that money that is being hoarded from the wealthiest people and passes it out to the rest of society where it can actually do some good. So I would at least like to try that first before we get to the point of let's take all the rich people's houses and turn everything into a commune. I don't deny that it may at some point be necessary to do that, but for now, I would be happy if we just raised the motherfuckers' taxes. And maybe it certainly makes me not a revolutionary. Again, that's just a difference in opinion or a difference in perspective between the two of us. But I would rather try that first than go to revolution, seize private property, turn everything into a commune. Let's try taxing the shit out of the guy for a while first and see where that gets us. Question from John Brockman. Steve, those social justice alchemy dorks are such losers. Why'd you hang out with them? I was told that you were not going to be there and that the purpose of the show would be to spend several hours dunking on you behind your back. So you can imagine my crushing disappointment when I joined the call and there you were, John. I mean, I feel like I was sold the whole show on false pretenses, I was lied to repeatedly. I said to Leto, I said to some random geek, I said, now John's not going to be there, right? John is definitely not going to be there. And they said, of course not. Of course not. Of course John's not going to be there. They told me repeatedly. And I was lied to. No, I don't know. I actually had a really, really good time doing social justice alchemy, and I would love to do it again at some point in the future. Anyone who hasn't seen my episode of Social Justice Alchemy, please go to the Social Justice Alchemy YouTube page and watch my episode, because it was a ton of fun, even though John Brockman was there. Here's a question from Dr. Babylon. Steve, this time I'm continuing my theme of criticizing the left. to begin with, there's the communist assumption that the problems of capitalism can only be fixed, or that socialism can only be achieved through a violent revolution, as well as the assumption by some communists that capitalism is unsustainable and therefore a proletariat revolution is inevitable. This mentality discourages participation in democracy and attempts at reform. I'm not going to argue that violence or revolution is never necessary. What I object to is the idea that revolution is preferable and a more surefire way of improving society. Another problem I have with communism specifically is the tendency to look at societal problems purely in terms of class without taking individual rights into consideration. Capitalism doesn't do a great job, and often does a terrible job, of respecting personal freedom or encouraging individuality. If we can't reform capitalism and must replace it, then whatever we move to next should be less collectivist, not more. Thoughts? I agree with a lot of that, actually. I would say, in terms of people who say that a revolution is necessary, a revolution, be it violent or otherwise, people that say a revolution is necessary or a revolution is inevitable, I can't help but think, and your point about how that kind of rhetoric can discourage people to participate in democracy, and that's the point that I really wanted to grab in your question there, because whenever people say that, I can't help but reflect on how pitifully low voter turnout is in this country. Voter turnout in the United States is so disgracefully low. And just as I was saying in a previous question about how, before we get to the point of seizing people's property and kicking the rich guy out of his house, why don't we try taxing him at a reasonable rate first? I can only imagine how much good could be done, how much reform could be achieved, and how, to what great extent, the problems that both communists and people like me who are not communists want to see alleviated could be addressed if more people would just participate in the system, if we would elect more progressive people to office, if we had a voter turnout and electorate that was a lot more engaged and informed than the one we have now, if our elections, especially our national elections, were not just a series of contests to see who could win a handful of states by appealing to undecided voters, like a small number of undecided voters that we're stuck doing because voter turnout is so fucking low in this country and the electorate is not nearly as large as it ought to be. And there are so many people who could vote without too much hardship who just don't. I shudder to think at how much good could be achieved if more people just participated in the current system that we have, and instead of saying, well, the system doesn't work, we need to get rid of it. Like a very, very large reason why the system doesn't work is because not enough of us participate in it. So it's a little frustrating for me to hear some people, to hear people, again, people that I respect, people that I like, people that I share goals with, broadly speaking, say, well, the system is fucked, we have to get rid of it. Like a major reason why the system is ineffective is because not enough people participate in it. And so that I agree with you there a lot. And I also, I don't know what we would replace capitalism with, if it was ever to be replaced, but I agree with you that whatever we replace it with should be an improvement, should not just be something different because capitalism sucks. I mean, of course capitalism sucks, but whatever we replace it with should be an improvement. And I am not convinced that communism in some form or another would be an improvement. Maybe it would be. I'm not saying it definitely wouldn't be. But I imagine it would be just as susceptible to the sorts of corruption and inequality and abuses and exploitations that capitalism is, or if not the exact same ones, then ones that would yield similar results. So, yeah, I'm not. There are a lot of practical things that I'm just not sold on, even though I admit that some kind of drastic change may someday be necessary. And that, it may even be It may even be inevitable. But yeah, that's all I have to say about them. That's all I have to ramble about on that topic. Ohirno says, what's your opinion on the current state of the Democratic primaries? I'm asking this before Super Tuesday, when all the talk is about stealing the nomination at a brokered convention. I hope the dust has settled by the time you answer this. Well, yeah, it has settled to an extent. I mean, I'm really bummed that Warren dropped out. I'm bummed that she dropped out, and I'm bummed about the reason that she dropped out, because she just did not do well at all in any of the Super Tuesday states. She was who I was going to vote for, as I have made no secret of in the past few months, and it really, really sucks that she dropped out. Her and Sanders were the only two candidates that I was really excited about, and of the two, I was way more into voting for Warren and wanting Warren to be president than I was Sanders. But now that she's gone, I am intending to vote for Bernie Sanders next month when my state's primary comes up, and I hope he gets the nomination. So, I mean, in that sense, I'm disappointed in the state of the Democratic primaries, but if Sanders gets the nomination, I will take that as a more than acceptable consolation prize. And if he doesn't, and if Biden gets the nomination, then I will vote for Joe Biden, and I will try to convince other people to vote for him as well, especially people on the left who are probably going to require some persuasion for a variety of reasons that I find extremely frustrating, given the what is at stake. You know, I mean, do you want Donald Trump to be president for 4 more years? Are you really gonna drag your feet about voting for Joe Biden? Like, I know that he's not who a lot of us wanted, but if he winds up being the guy, I'm sorry, if it comes down to Biden versus Trump, you really need to vote for Biden. Like, you know, I'm disappointed that my candidate didn't win too, but in November, you have to vote for who's the best person on the ballot. And the best person on the ballot in November, if it does come down to Biden versus Trump, the best person on the ballot, at least the best person on the ballot with a remotely realistic chance of winning, will be Biden, and that's who you need to vote for. And if it comes to that, that is the message I will try to send using whatever meager platform I have, between the time that the nomination is clinched and the general election. I mean, that's just the way it is, you know. But yeah, I do. I wish it had been Warren. I hope now that it's Sanders. We'll see where it goes from here. But I mean, I'm not super jazzed about Senator Warren having to drop out. Next question is from John Burnsy. Okay, so I'm going to skip my question for this week. Does your favorite wrestling show have a man born in Saskatoon and enter the ring to doesn't matter the song as long as it's being played by bagpipes? Does AEW have that man of men? Yeah, didn't think so. Nope. Going back to what I wrote earlier about a previous week, but had to shelve last week. CBS or NBC or ABC or a streaming site, which is best for hosting Star Trek? I asked you about Seth MacFarlane through NBC getting to have his version of Star Trek episodes created, and someone in the chat mentioned Seth's transphobic comments. If that's true, is there any organization that deserves to broadcast Star Trek? If the Weinstein Company got the rights to produce Star Trek movies, I wouldn't want to watch them, and I hope you wouldn't either. Or, despite all of the things a corporation has done, they canceled Firefly, they're absolved from their past transgressions. If CBS made millions off of Bill Cosby, this is yet to be proven, while willfully ignoring or assisting him in his crimes, shouldn't they be held to a higher standard or not? Do you understand my point? Maybe instead of fines for corporations, related assets should be seized and destroyed by the government if a corporation's failures are particularly grievous. What do you think? That would probably be a lot more effective in getting them to change their ways long term than fines that they can just take out of their quarterly profits. I mean, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But I mean, look. Trying to be an ethical consumer of entertainment is always going to be an exercise in compromise, because you will never be able to perfectly ethically consume entertainment. There will always be something that a corporation or a person involved with a show or what have you has done that will make you question your support of it, that will make you think, oh, Jesus, can I in good conscience do this? This is just a burden that those of us who have a conscience and who try to have a social awareness, this is just something that we have to deal with. So, is there a network? Is there a corporation that deserves to have Star Trek, whatever that means? In the sense of, is there a company that is morally pure? Or, I mean, no. Are there some that are better than others? Yeah. Are there some that I am more willing to accept? Yeah. I have a much easier time accepting that Star Trek is owned by CBS than I would have if it were owned by some avowedly right-wing outlet. I mean, suppose the guy who owns Sinclair Broadcasting somehow acquired the exclusive rights to Star Trek, and Star Trek was only shown on Sinclair stations. Or, I mean, it could be a lot worse. And I'm not sure if we should necessarily, as much as I love Star Trek, I don't know if we should necessarily hold up Star Trek as this pure, wonderful prize that only the worthy can have to broadcast, because Star Trek itself is very problematic in a lot of ways. Like, Star Trek itself is not perfect. There are compromises that you must make to enjoy Star Trek itself, no matter what channel it's on. Never mind having to justify watching it on a particular channel. So this is all, I mean, it's all an exercise in compromise. And it all comes down to the choices that you are able to make and live with. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. If Star Trek being on CBS All Access, for example, is something that someone just can't justify, morally speaking, it's not that they can't afford it. It's just that they don't feel it's right somehow to watch the show on that outlet. Then that's up to them. That's a decision they have to make. And if someone else says, I can live with that, that's their decision. These are the sort of pushes and pulls and that we have to do if we want to be, socially aware people and still have something to watch on TV. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Hey, Steve, I think there are a lot of conservative points in Star Trek. One is the military-like infrastructure that Starfleet and, in fact, the military of other civilizations, in particular, the Enterprise from TOS, i.e. the USS Enterprise, which purposely evokes the ancient USS Enterprise CV-65. The idea is brought up in the show as a naval-like spaceship carrying a, in spirit, Anglo-European crew, and yes, Sulu and Uhura can be counted in this, going throughout the galaxy and spreading United Nations-like ideas. Take Kirk's rather Marshall Plan statements to the Organians in Errand of Mercy, comparing the Federation as the free market democratic organization, opposed to the Klingons as they are portrayed as fascist, authoritative, and command-centered. From the mid-60s till the early 90s, the Klingons and Federation were unmistakably used as an analogy of the Cold War, both sides capable of destroying each other many times over. In TNG, the atmosphere of the Enterprise is less of a serious and military-like structure. The NCC 1701 to the lavish Enterprise D, evoking the essence of 80s bull market economics, the elegance of travel and yuppie and valley girl in the personality of the crew of the ship. Take the hyper-motivated Sonia Gomez, who, as some conservatives could point out, highlights the yuppie attitudes of the youth generation, whom in the 80s embraced the ideas of hard work and success. This is in contrast to the cynical hippies who mistrusted the establishment of the 60s. In Enterprise, we see special units known as MACOs, which are specifically tasked with military operations. This comes as Enterprise came out in the early 2000s, around September 11, 2001, and the subsequent 2003 Iraq War. Some of the leading figures in Starfleet, Admiral Nechayev, Captain Jellicoe, and Admiral Pressman, are very conservative on issues of Federation policy and security, evoking real-life connections to Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, and Norman Schwarzkopf, and likely others. This doesn't mean that conservatives can't like Star Trek, but progressives shouldn't shun conservatives for liking Star Trek. Progressive and liberal are simply abstract connotations made by and for a contemporary audience. What will these ideas mean centuries in the future versus what we think of these terms today? Yeah, no, those are all really good points, and some of those points I do address in my video, or will address in my video. The conservatives. Why do conservatives like Star Trek video has been scripted, but I haven't shot it yet. I'll probably shoot it maybe tonight after I'm done with this. But I do address some of those points, especially the military organization of Starfleet and the fact that Starfleet is a quite apparent metaphor for the military, particularly the American military, and how that might appeal to a conservative person's sense of nationalism and patriotism. I think that's a good point. And yeah, I think the rest of those are good points. And you know, when you say, well, we shouldn't shun conservative Star Trek fans, we shouldn't shun conservatives for liking Star Trek. I agree with you. I think we should shun them for being conservatives. Next question is from Shad Sterling. Was it my imagination, or did Riker's house look an awful lot like Kirk's in Generations? I didn't think about that until I read your question, but now that you mention it, yes, it does look a lot like Kirk's house in Generations. It looks a lot like Kirk's house. And I suppose that's appropriate in a way because Riker, the character, especially early on, had a lot in common with Captain Kirk. And I suppose it would make a certain amount of sense that he would end up in a house not unlike the house that we glimpse Kirk living in Generations. So yeah. I don't think it's just you. I think that's something that other people have probably noticed for sure. John Gingras, dear Steve, can Troy and Riker be my adoptive mom and dad? I promise to share with you. Love, John. Oh yeah, okay. Well, I guess I'll have to call you brother from now on if we're gonna have the same mom and dad. Yeah. How wonderful was it to see Riker and Troy again in this week's Picard? The moment when when Picard comes into the house and Riker sees him is one of the most joyful moments of Star Trek I've ever seen. I just loved it. I wasn't sure if anything could top Picard and Hugh seeing each other again, but Picard and Riker seeing each other again, and Riker's reaction just warms my heart. It was wonderful. And the whole episode was really good. I thought it was a very, very, maybe the best episode of the show so far, and due in no small part to the amazing work done by Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis, and just how incredibly happy I was to see those characters again, and how wonderful I thought their interactions with Jean-Luc were. Yeah, really, really good episode. David Colby, did you know that according to several Jewish people I've talked to, denying or whitewashing Jewish heritage is a kind of anti-Semitism? Basically, by making Jewish people invisible and downplaying their contributions, you can begin to open up spaces to make attacks, both social and otherwise, against Jewish people. Anti-Semitism thrives in a culture of ignorance, since if you, a nice Gentile, don't know that something is anti-Semitic, you can't speak out against it. Anywho, sure do love how many moderates like to call Bernie another white guy. That's sure not fucked up at all. Boy, howdy. Yeah, and you know, we saw just today there was an incident in that everybody was talking about on Twitter about a guy who went to a Bernie rally and unfurled a fucking Nazi flag. You know, so clearly anti-Semitic. There hasn't been a lot of really like super overt anti-Semitism against Senator Sanders up to this point, but clearly that is what we can look forward to. And I mean, look, the truth is, if as much as I am going to vote for Bernie and as much as I hope Bernie gets the nomination, if that does happen, if Bernie Sanders does become the nominee, he's running against an anti-Semitic candidate who has a grossly, virulently anti-Semitic racist base, and there's going to be a ton of anti-Semitism in the campaign this fall, if it is Trump versus Sanders. Or if Sanders, even if it's not Sanders, if Sanders has any kind of prominent role in the campaign, there's going to be a lot of anti-Semitism because Trump and his base are anti-Semitic. So I think it's good to mention that, so that we can be aware of it. And yes, there are many times where anti-Semitism is hiding in plain sight, or where it consists of something as simple as erasure, you know, as not speaking about something being of a Jewish character when it actually is, or not pointing out that an attack on something that is of a Jewish character is a form of anti-Semitism, or can be a form of anti-Semitism. So I appreciate you bringing this up in your question, because if you think that Bernie's Jewishness is something that you can ignore, or if moderates think it's something that they can ignore or should ignore now, that will certainly not be the case if he becomes the nominee. I guarantee you, the fact that he is a Jewish person will be extremely in the forefront of a lot of the attacks against him and a lot of the people who are going to be supporting Donald Trump. Lynn Kibblemom. Hey, Steve, you mentioned in the Q&A for the Ensign's log that you and Jason were looking for a woman to provide female character voices and mentioned Tina's computer voice as an example of this need. Being a technical ignoramus, at least in this area, how did you produce Tina's computer voice? Was it computer generated? If so, how? Well, I didn't produce it, so and I don't know specifically what program Jason used, but there are voice synthesizer programs that are widely available. There are websites you can go to that you can, it's text to voice. You type in whatever you want the voice to say. You select whatever digital voice, whatever computerized voice you want to say it, and then it says whatever you type. And that's, generally speaking, that's how the Tina voice was accomplished. It was a text to voice, digitized computer voice. I don't know specifically what program Jason used, but that's how we did it. And as he said in the live stream, that's the main reason why Tina became an android, because that way we could have her voice in the show while we continue to look for an actual woman to help us from time to time and provide voices in the show. Next question is from Sean Hartley. Sorry, second Ask Away in a row where I have left it to the last minute. Star Trek has changed with the times since TOS. Do you think it will continue to change as the world does? If so, how and why? Well, I can't say specifically how, because I don't know exactly how the world will continue to change in the future. But yes, I think it will. And why? Because it has to. Because if it wants to continue to be relevant, yes, it has to continue to change and grow and evolve. And it has to change not only in terms of the kinds of social and political issues it addresses through its episodes, because those will continue to change as society changes and moves forward, but it also has to continue to change in terms of its style and its presentation. You can't continue making a show in now the 2020s in the same way that it was made in the 1960s. Star Trek in the 1960s was not the same as Star Trek in the 1970s and 80s in the films. Star Trek The Next Generation was not the same as Star Trek in the 60s, and it was different in certain ways from the films. And the current generation of Discovery and Picard, and also, of course, the J.J. Abrams movies, the Kelvinverse movies, they are different from what came before them. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is, in fact, a good thing. A franchise like Star Trek that has existed for so long across multiple generations and so many decades needs to continue to change and grow and evolve if it wants to stay alive, if it doesn't want to stagnate. People who argue that the new Star Trek doesn't feel like Star Trek, or that Discovery or Picard are not good shows because they are different in some way than Star Trek The Next Generation or Star Trek the original series, or whatever the person making the complaint's favorite version of Star Trek is, they're coming dangerously close, and in some cases are actually doing this. To just arguing for creative stagnation, or arguing for the stagnation of the franchise. It has to continue to grow and change with the times if it wants to continue to remain vibrant and relevant. Because if it ever fails to become relevant, if people just stop watching it, then it will no longer exist. And as a Star Trek fan, I like having Star Trek around, and I like having Star Trek now. I like having new current Star Trek. I mean, I love the old stuff. I'll watch the old stuff for the rest of my life. But I like having new stuff too, because I like having a Star Trek that talks to us about our present moment in history. I think that's something that's very important that Star Trek has always done, and I would like to see it continue to do that. And finally, last question from Joe McClory. Who are some of your favorite female directors? Who are some non-American directors you really like? I believe I've answered this question once or twice before, and I always, as far as female directors, I think I nearly always say Cassie Lemons. I love Cassie Lemons. She directed a great movie called Eve's Bayou that I wish more people had seen. It's just a terrific movie. And she also directed the Harriet Tubman biopic that came out last year that unfortunately I have not yet seen. I really need to see Harriet. I haven't seen it yet. And also, I mean, Catherine Bigelow is fantastic. Catherine Bigelow is a great director with a lot of sort of unacknowledged range because she's a great action director, but she can do like serious movies, like The Hurt Locker, and she can do less serious movies or less, more like goofier movies, like the original Point Break, which is a movie that Catherine Bigelow directed. It is just fantastic. As for non-American directors, Steve McQueen comes to mind. Ang Lee comes to mind. Pedro Almodovar. Those are the ones that just come immediately to mind. But yeah, it's always a good exercise, especially if you're an American, to sort of look beyond the bubble of Hollywood and American films, because there are so many fantastic international filmmakers out there. Those are just the ones that I thought of off the top of my head. There are others that I am failing to mention, but that's it for the patron questions. Let's talk about what you all are talking about in the live chat. I will turn my attention now to the live chat for the remainder of the show for the next 30 minutes or so, or maybe even more. So let's see what people want to talk about in the live chat. I see we're talking about something disgusting that I've never heard of. So, okay. Okay, 255 AD says, I think you missed my point. I was trying to ask why you think we have to try working in the system before we try revolution. Why does the system have presumed legitimacy? I think I tried to answer that by saying that I feel like the system that we have now would be a lot more effective if more people participated in it. And therefore, because of that, I don't think that we have reached a point where the system that we currently have is untenable or is incapable of addressing the problems. That was kind of the answer I was trying to give there. I apologize if I didn't put that across. I will not Google it, Leto. Thank you. Yeah, and John, I don't know what to think of it because I don't know what it is, and I'm not Googling it. And some random geek, I'm not clicking that link because Leto told me not to. So there you go. David, yes, the Kzinti. Riker name dropped the Kzinti in Picard. That is so cool. He's we've had some trouble lately with the Kzinti. Oh yeah, as an animated series fan, that was really cool to see. Some random geek says, we've tried to tax the rich much more. The rich then bought elections because they could and got politicians to lower taxes. Thoughts? Well, I mean, that's true, but I mean, a socialist revolution is not necessarily permanent either. I mean, you can say, well, taxing the rich hasn't worked because the rich have acquired enough political influence to roll back the taxes. Well, who's to say that a revolution would not be defeated and undone by the rich as well? I mean, revolution is not a permanent solution either. So the fact that you could say, well, we've tried to tax the rich and it was undone, that to me is not a reason not to try it again and not to try to do a better job of it this time. Henry Brainig, have you ever watched or read anything from the Gundam franchise? No, not at all. Liam Foley, if a Star Trek style replicator existed, do you think the government would limit both use and access? I think it would have to be regulated somehow to keep people from just replicating weapons of mass destruction. But I think it would have to be regulated in some point. Yeah, I don't know about how much it would be limited, but yeah, I think that's almost a necessity. 255 AD says, is a clear Biden victory better than a contested convention? The superdelegates would give it to Biden anyway, then Bernie supporters would feel betrayed and stay home. Yeah, I do think something other than a contested convention would certainly be preferable politically, for sure. Yeah, for the reasons you state. Um, just checking something here. Hang on a second. Okay. Uh, so I just skipped. I just dropped down to the bottom of the chat. Radical Bacon says, "Is lava wet?" I mean, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to test it to find out. Super chat from John Burns. Thank you, John. George Patton was the wrong American general to like because of his politics, but he did start having German civilians taking tours of the camps in Buchenwald and Dachau because of we didn't know. Well, good for Patton. Good on Patton for doing that. Let me go back through the chat and see if I can find some questions that I missed. John Brockman says, "Is Riker the Al Gore of space, or is Al Gore the Riker of Earth?" I feel like I like Riker so much more than I like Al Gore that I would not want to. I mean, but I nothing against Al Gore. I'm not. I don't have. I'm not anti Al Gore, but I don't know. With the beard, I think I'd have to say Al Gore is the Riker because he's clearly trying. He's reaching. He's trying to emulate Riker, not the other way around. Joe McClory, have I seen Birds of Prey? No, I have not. Some random geek, but where does their right to be rich come from? I'm not. See, again, I'm less concerned with their right to be rich. I'm. To me, if we tax them tremendously, far more than they're being taxed now. If we tax them at a rate similar to the way they were being taxed in the 50s and 60s, and possibly even more, considering how much wealth we are talking about now, that I feel like I would rather try that until we, before we get to the point of let's just get rid of all rich people. Yeah, to me, it's not a matter of whether or not they have a right to be rich. It's a matter of what is the best way of dealing with the problem in the situation that we're in right now. Carlisle, the Cinephile, I have not seen Gravity Falls yet. Sorry. Red Spiral Ray, would you be interested in a show based in the Kelvin timeline? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love a show based in the Kelvin timeline. Anthony Villalpando, what do you think of the concept of slapping term limits on our politicians and not just the president? I am massively in favor of that. I think term limits should be a part of every elected office, not just the president. I'm a major, major supporter of term limits. Some random geek, you could say the same about reform then. Any reform made can be de-reformed. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You're completely right. Why advocate for reform as opposed to revolution? Because I think reform is more realistic. Seal0626, do you think the Kelvin timeline has its own parallel mirror universe, simultaneously split from the Prime's mirrorverse? Yes, and I think there have been comics about that. The IDW comics, the Star Trek comics that are set in the Kelvin timeline that follow the Kelvin Captain Kirk, they did a mirror universe storyline a couple years ago that was a lot of fun. Liam Foley, Steve, do you like the movies of the very liberal Rob Reiner? I like some of Rob's movies. Yeah, Rob, like we're buddies. Me and Rob, I like Rob's movies. I like some movies that Rob Reiner has. I mean, he directed Spinal Tap, and that's a classic. He's a lot of his stuff is kind of middle of the road and commercial, and commercial in a way that doesn't appeal to me. So I mean, he's not. I can't honestly say he's one of my favorite directors, but he's a solid director, sure. I prefer him to someone like Ron Howard, I think John Brockman tested the lava. He says, oops, Radical Bacon. Yes, it is wet. F.O. Ertel says, after the vote to PM, there is a handshake and give flowers thing, and the left representative threw the flowers to his feet and refused the handshake. I think that was the right thing to do, but what do you think how we should handle politicians that are not fascists, far rights, that seem to be okay to work with them to get their political goals? I don't have a problem with that, what you just described, not refusing to shake hands with someone. I'm completely on board with that. Radical Bacon, morning showers or evening showers? Usually morning. Every once in a while, I will not take a shower in the morning and I will take a shower in the evening instead, but almost always I'm a morning shower person. Robert Mills, your comic strip Riker is so funny. Oh, thank you very much. I like writing him that way. John Doe, I'm a new viewer here, so sorry if you've answered this already, but I'm wondering what are your opinions on the Young Turks if you even watch them. I almost never watch the Young Turks or any of the people associated with them. Occasionally I might watch, I might see a clip that somebody tweets, but generally I don't really watch them. Henry Brannick, do you think a classical progressive candidate, as in a more militant one like Theodore Roosevelt, would fare better in terms of getting some establishment support? Yeah, probably. Yeah, sure. Oh, and right, yes, somebody, John Burns said Rob Reiner directed The Princess Bride. Yes, he did. That will be another one of his better films, I think. Nathaniel Robinson, will Soji be a good replacement for Data after this season? I don't see. That's what I like about it, though. I don't think they're setting her up as a replacement for Data. Obviously, her connection to Data is important, but I don't think they're setting her up as, oh, she's the new Data. Or at least I don't think they would go that obvious of a route. I am curious to see, since they are definitely doing season 2. I am very curious to see who from season 1 will be carried over to season 2. And what that story will be. But I don't think we should expect Soji to just be slotted into, oh, she's the Data. But I think she'd be fine, honestly. 255 AD, does Biden have a snowball's chance against Trump? Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. For sure. Joe McClory, would you consider a maximum wealth level? What would you set it at? I wouldn't have a problem. Would I consider it? Yeah. I haven't given a lot of thought to what the level should be, but would I consider it? Yeah. Yeah. I would consider, I don't know, anything up to $1 billion. That seems reasonable. If you can't make a living, if you can't live with a net worth of $1 billion or an income, if you can't live on an income of less than $1 billion a year, then like, I don't know what to tell you. And that would probably be generous. It could be much, much lower than that, and everybody would still be fine. So I honestly don't know. Radical Bacon says, tell me to take my meds, drink some water, eat some food, and attempt to get a good night's sleep, please. Okay. Listen to me. Take your meds, drink some water, eat some food, and try to get some sleep tonight. Okay? Seriously. How's that? Is that good? You can play this back if you need to. But seriously, no, I mean, in all seriousness, please take care of yourself because I want you to be okay. Dead Vinny, I like dogs. Do you have a dog? Not at the moment, but I love dogs. Oh, John Burns, I'm sorry if I missed your question. And I apologize, as I always say, I often miss a lot of people's questions in the live chat because the live chat scrolls up and then I have to go back. I have to go back and find people's questions. So if I missed your question, it is nothing personal. I'm going back up now to see if I can find your question, John. So give me a second. You said it had something to do with AEW, so now I really want to see it. Oh, okay, here it is. So your Ensign's podcast thing, will there be an episode of a couple of unknown wrestlers who are hanging out in the lower levels of AEW? That's good. No, I don't think we're going to be doing the Jobber's Log. I don't think that's going to be something that we're doing. Yeah. Did you see the Zoidberg guy? I just had to ban him because he's a fucking racist asshole. Let me see. 255 AD is, if not, is a second term for Trump the end of the world? I mean, that question, literally, I've been going through scenarios in my head. I don't think it is literally the end of the world, but it's not good. Like, it's not good at all. Some random geek, you are stealing Leto's gimmick. Some random geek asks, is Riker a fuckboy? I believe I already answered that question in the Ensign's Log live stream. And I think, yes, Riker is a fuckboy. Both the real Riker on TNG and also Riker is in the character I play on the Ensign's Log. I think they both would qualify as fuckboys. Leto says, on a scale from Worf to Riker, how much of a fuckboy is Picard? He's closer to Riker. He's closer to Riker. I think he's closer to Riker than Worf for sure. Radical Bacon says, why not Zoidberg? That's why. Exactly. CLO626 also, how was one single pizza enough to feed 5 people? There must be some kind of quantum thing going on with that pizza. It's future Star Trek pizza. That's how. I mean, they even gave Soji 2 pieces, and I only saw him cook the 1 pizza. So yeah, you're right. It's a good point. You just broke the show. How can I enjoy the show now? John Brockman says, should we legalize sex work? Yes. Red Spiral Ray, is there another property you'd like to see crossover with Star Trek if it were just a comic or a novel? I mean, there have been crossovers already that I've enjoyed. I mean, obviously the big one is Star Trek and Star Wars. That's sort of like the DC versus Marvel of popular sci-fi. But I mean, there's really nothing like that I'm dying to see. I watched Star Trek for its own sake, whether it crosses over with something or not. I mean, that's neat if it happens, but it's nothing that I really spend a whole lot of time like daydreaming about. Liam Foley, does Bernie's age concern you? No, not really. Yeah, Dead Vinny, the Dark Order log. I don't think so. Yeah, X-Men crossed over with Star Trek. I don't think I ever read that. But yeah, that was something that happened. 255AD says, how do you feel about Bernie's chances right now? 538 has pushed him way the fuck down to 1 in 20 odds. Well, I mean, I'm still going to vote for him. And I mean, 538 has been wrong in the past. 538, I believe, predicted that Hillary Clinton was going to win last time. So unfortunately, they are not infallible. But, you know, I mean, even if Bernie doesn't have much of a chance by the time my primary rolls around, I'm still going to vote for him if he's still in the race. Super chat from John Burns. Movie idea. Patton Oswalt plays the Robert Downey Jr. part in a Tropic Thunder reboot until the surgery, where he's replaced by Jamie Foxx. Would that be an acceptable reboot suggestion? That's really clever, actually. That's really clever. That would be maybe a more acceptable way to do it for people who are uncomfortable with the blackface, even if it's a situation like that where it's meant to be sort of a satire of blackface. That would be You start out where he's a white dude. The actor is played by a white actor, and then when he undergoes the surgery, he's actually then from that point on played by a black actor. But you know, I'm a clueless white person, so I'm not necessarily the best person to ask. But yeah, it seems okay to me. You know. Radical Bacon says, Steve, what is good in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of the women. And also, and I can't stress this enough, a Hawaiian sweet roll with just the thickest smear of butter you ever saw. Oh. And Canada Dry lemon lime seltzer. These are the things that are good in life. Henry Brannig, do you reckon there's a possibility for Bernie to make use of aggressive coalition politics in order to further the progressive agenda? A possibility? Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would like to see Bernie and Bernie's campaign build more coalitions, at least among people on the left. You know, I don't think we need to be wasting time trying to reach people on the right. I think that's been proven time and time again in recent history to be a waste of time. But in terms of building coalitions with people who are center, who are left of center. Yeah, I think that's very important. I would like to see more of that. And by the way, I've completely given up on going back and scrolling back up through the chat. So if I missed your question, I apologize. I'm grabbing a question from whatever I happen to see on screen at the moment. So please bear with me and be patient with me. And don't take it personally if I missed your question. 255 AD, would I feel more comfortable taking the rich's land if the revolution was already happening anyway? It would depend on are we taking their land and is it being put to good use? Like, is doing that alleviating poverty? I mean, then I suppose I wouldn't have I don't think I could have like that big of a problem with it if that were the case. You're right, Funk. Yeah, Canada Dry Ginger Ale is the tits. But this isn't ginger ale. This is seltzer water, which is also quite good. Super chat from John Burns. Thank you again. He says, 538 did mention that there was a chance that Trump would win the Electoral College because they couldn't see Hillary losing California. Yeah, I think I remember that. Oh, Jason's here. Opinionville. He says, hey, Steve, I officially quit watching Picard last night. Thoughts? I feel sorry for you. I feel great pain and compassion in my heart for you, my dear, dear, dear friend, because I am really, really digging the show at this point. I like the show. I have to say, I like Picard, and I really, really loved last night's episode. I loved that episode. So, it's up to you. I mean, it's you decide what you want to watch. If you're not enjoying it, then you shouldn't watch it. But I ache for you. I ache for you, my friend. I wish that you could feel the happiness that I feel when I watch that show, especially when I watched yesterday's episode. I mean, when Riker gives him that bear hug, Jesus Christ, man. I feel for you. I feel badly for you. Radical Bacon, have you pet the cat today? I certainly have. Some random geek, what if the best way to deal with the problems of poverty is to have a revolution to end capitalism in the state? Do you think we can vote away capitalism? Well, I don't know. We probably can't vote away capitalism. We can vote for ways to improve it or to ameliorate its damage that it causes in people's lives. Can we vote it away? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, sure, maybe. I don't know. What if revolution turns out to be the best way? Well, then I guess that's what I would support, but like, I'm not, as we've made repeatedly clear, I'm not convinced that is the case. Red Spiral Ray says, Undertaker versus AJ Styles at WrestleMania. Thumbs up. I'm not going to watch it, so I don't care. I would prefer Undertaker retire and AJ wrestle somebody else at WrestleMania, but I'm not going to watch it anyway, so it doesn't matter to me personally. Francois, did the cat care? It's hard to tell. Sometimes she seems to enjoy being petted and scritched, and sometimes she is. You cannot imagine her indifference unless you have a cat. Then you can imagine it quite easily. I'm sure. Andrew Hayes, did you get goosebumps like I did when Riker told his house to raise shields and up the security of his property and the voice he always had on the Enterprise bridge? I didn't get goosebumps, but I got a big shit-eating grin on my face. Yes, I loved it. But the hug was what really got me. The hug. When Riker turns around and he sees him and he goes, oh, man! And he just reaches around him. Oh, I love that. Jason says, I finally got you to ache for me. 7 years. 7 freaking years. Yes. And all you had to do was say that you're not going to watch a show that I like. You see how easy it was? Secular Scholar, do you find certain episodes of Trek hard to watch because of how dated they are? Not really. I don't think I've ever had trouble getting through an episode because of how dated it is. That doesn't really bother me. No, not really. Nathaniel Robinson, would you reshoot your Troy video after Marina Sirtis' performance from the last episode? No, but I might add some things to it. I mean, I do think Troy was very well used in that episode, and I do think she came across as much more of a competent and if I may say, empathetic counselor in that episode than she ever did on the show, which is ironic since she is not acting as a counselor. She's just acting as a friend. But yeah, I probably would have found some things to mention that I didn't because I hadn't seen that episode. Another super chat from John Burns. Thank you, John. So you didn't hear the rumor that the new leader of Starfleet who solves everything in Picard will be played by Adam Baldwin in the last episode? No, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that rumor. 255 AD says, why do you think Biden could do better than Hillary? A lot of the breadtube people have been like, Biden, 4 more years of Trump confirmed. Well, I think a lot of it might not have anything to do with Biden himself. It might have to do with the fact that hopefully now that we have seen what can happen if people don't turn out to vote, i.e. Trump being president, more people will be motivated to turn out to vote for Biden than that perhaps didn't vote for Hillary last time. I mean, I think that's a factor in it as well. Opinionville Jason says, hey, Steve, did you like the part where the girl with the bow and arrow was just a cosplay by Riker's daughter, but had been used as a potential Trek in all of the previews? I mean, a preview had a bait and switch? Doesn't bother me at all. Doesn't bother me at all. John Burns, psych, it's actually Catherine Janeway, but in prison fatigues with a Russian accent. A reference that I get to a show I have never watched. Porpoise Power, should TNG have brought back those mind-controlling bugs from season 1? You mean to explain why people in Starfleet are such assholes? I don't really think it's necessary. People in Starfleet have always been assholes if you're looking in the right direction. John Brockman, do you believe in life after love? You are not going to get me to quote fucking Cher lyrics. It's not going to happen. But yes, I do. Serenum Geek says, what if Biden creates just as much apathy today as Hillary did in 2016? Well, then that would be unfortunate. And also, I would say, look, given the fact that if Biden becomes the nominee and Biden loses the election to Donald fucking Trump, because of voter apathy, or because there were that many people who just couldn't be bothered to get up and vote for the guy because it was Joe Biden and they just couldn't get excited about him, then shame on them and shame on us. I mean, look, I would rather someone other than Biden be the nominee, but the truth is, if Biden is the nominee, then I'm going to go vote for him, and everybody else who doesn't want Donald fucking Trump to be the president for 4 more years should get out and vote for him. And if they don't, shame on them. And fuck them. Not just shame on them. Fuck them. Fuck you. Oh, Biden doesn't excite me. Does Donald Trump as president for 4 more years excite you? Like, suck it the fuck up and go vote for the guy. He's not my first choice either. But if he's the nominee, I'm going to vote for him. And if you're someone who is not a Trump voter, but you decided not to vote for Joe Biden because I just can't get excited about Joe Biden, and he loses the fucking election and Trump is president for 4 more years, I'm not going to be happy with you. And I'm not going to be interested in hearing your fucking excuses and how Biden just didn't excite me. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel. Jason says, my favorite part was when Riker almost burned a pizza. Yeah. Cancel red alert. It was just a tomato. That wasn't my favorite part, but I did like it. Secular Scholar, do you think Biden might have a better chance than Hillary because he's a man? Yeah, because we live in a terrible sexist country. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I do think so. Oh, super chat from John Gingras. Thank you, John. No matter how much things change, Troy will always encounter people her abilities don't work on. But seriously, I loved that episode and wept with joy at seeing Troy and Riker together again. It was wonderful, wasn't it? I really, really liked it. It gave me a warm feeling all through me. The Ms. Lords, last night's Picard made me cry no less than 6 times, and finally Elnor seems to have really connected with his purpose. What do you think of Elnor's progression these last 2 episodes? Yeah, I liked how Elnor was used in this episode. I think I think actually, weirdly enough, separating him from Picard has been good for his character. So yeah, I do think Elnor has been brought along a little bit better these last few episodes. David Appleman says, I'm a few episodes deep in the Ensign's log, and I am digging it a lot more than anticipated because I am a canon lover who doesn't usually like fan fiction. Well, thank you. And hopefully Jason's still in the chat, and he saw you say that. Yeah, as I think we mentioned in our live stream last week, when we were taking questions for the end of our second season, we both said that, I mean, yeah, it is fan fiction, but I mean, we do try to fit it within established canon as much as we can. Like, we both try, when we're doing the Ensign's Log, to have it not contradict canon, and to fit as much as we can. So that's important to us as the people who do it. So I'm glad you appreciate it. And thank you for listening to the show. I'm glad you like it. And super chat from John Burns again, ignoring that Michael Moore mentioned that tens of thousands of voters voted for everything on the ballot in 2016 except for president. Yeah, which again, I mean, like that, in a way that pisses me off even more, because you were right there. You could have voted for Hillary Clinton and you just didn't. Like, I'm glad that you, like, hey, look, going and voting for Democrats down the ticket so that maybe we can, enlarge our majority in the House and take back the Senate. That is a lot better than just not voting at all, right? I mean, I'll take that over just not voting at all. But if you're there, vote for the fucking Democratic nominee for president. As long as you're there, vote for the fucking Democratic nominee for president. What the fuck? Do you want Donald Trump to be able to appoint Supreme Court justices for 4 more years? David Colby, if you were a wizard from the Harry Potter universe, how many seconds would it take before you started using magic to help people? And fuck the ministry's rules about secrecy. Yeah, I don't think I would be too worried about. I mean, I would probably get in trouble with the ministry for shit like that. It probably wouldn't take very long. Funk Yes, says the Ensign's Log enhances Star Trek canon. Thank you. Thank you very much. John Brockman, should someone punch, shoe on head, an armored skeptic? I would never tell anyone to do such a thing, but if that happened, I would probably think it was hilarious, and I would buy that person a Coke if I ever ran into them. But I would never advocate violence against them. But if somebody did it of their own accord, I mean, it's not like I'd be mad at them. Super chat from John Burns, not voting. Pro-choice people allow that, right? I'm not sure what that means. 255 AD, question, why do people think we must have to have an awesome candidate to beat Lord Dampnut? It wasn't a landslide. He barely won because of Electoral College. Because that's the narrative that's been allowed to take hold. Because people have allowed it to... have allowed that to become the narrative, that Trump is some unbeatable monster and we need to have the perfect candidate. When you're right, he lost the popular vote pretty decisively, and he barely won the Electoral College because he got a few thousand more votes in a couple of districts in a couple of states. But that's not the narrative. The narrative is, Trump won last time and he's going to win this time too, unless we have the ideal candidate. So I think it's horseshit, and a lot of it is because that's just Democrats are terrible at messaging and terrible at setting the narrative. Super chat from Andrew Cole. Thank you. Nobody needs an excuse for not voting. The Democratic establishment feeling entitled to votes because their guy isn't Trump is how they lose. Look, I agree with you that the Democratic Party could fuck up a wet dream, and that the Democratic Party should not be leaning on, hey, we're not Trump, you have to vote for us. I agree. They should be making an affirmative case to people. It's not like it's completely, it wouldn't be the Democrats' fault at all. But for Christ's sake, like, do you want Donald Trump to be the president for 4? Like, this is the point that I'm at. Like, vote for the Democratic nominee. I agree with you that the Democratic Party is a shit show and needs to do a lot of things a lot better than it does. But in November, vote for the fucking Democratic nominee. John Burns says, what is another super chat from John? Thank you again. What's your view of a protest vote? If we're in a situation where it looks like it's going to be a close election and the choice is between a Democrat and a Republican, and you don't vote for the Democrat, then I take a very, very dim view of a protest vote. I mean, I'm not a big fan of it. If it results in a Republican winning an election, I'm not a fan of it at all. 255 AD says, I also want to get really mad at apathetic progressives, but what does that achieve? Well, it might not achieve anything, but it is my honest. I mean, it is as was said about the people who wished, who were happy at the news that Scrooge was dead in A Christmas Carol. It is the emotion of my heart. I mean, maybe it doesn't accomplish anything, but it's how I feel. I have very, very little patience for people who say like, well, I couldn't bring myself to vote for the Democrat. It's just, okay, well, I mean, I'm glad I'm glad that, having Donald Trump as president for 4 more years was apparently worth it so that you could not have to live with yourself for voting for a candidate that you just weren't too keen on. Like, I have very little tolerance for that sort of thing, especially after the last 4 years. Francois, I've heard it said that the DNC would prefer 4 more years of Trump over a Bernie presidency. Is that actually possible? I don't think things are that bad, but I mean, I do think there are people in the Democratic establishment. There are moderate centrist Democrats that are that out of touch. I don't know if they would necessarily say, well, I would prefer more Trump than Bernie, but there are certainly people in the Democratic Party and in positions of influence that are that fucking out of touch. So, yeah, I mean, and that's a problem. Radical Bacon, big spoon or little spoon? Little spoon. I don't really like the big spoon. I like the big spoon for serving. I don't like the big spoon. I like a smaller spoon, like a teaspoon for eating. Not for, I don't like the big spoon for eating. No. Vovacat17, so did you actually watch BattleBots? That's the only type of wrestling I can watch. People hitting each other feels savage and medieval to me. I get that. I mean, I didn't watch BattleBots since you mentioned it in the last live stream. I didn't watch it. I might have seen an episode of it a long, long time ago, but I didn't watch it. I haven't watched it recently. And I can respect that. Not wanting to watch a sport where people hit each other. I can respect that. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really bother me. At least it doesn't bother me. It doesn't. There are things about the physicality of wrestling and the danger that wrestlers put themselves in sometimes that bothers me, but obviously not enough to get me to stop watching. Anthony Villalpando, do you think Donald Trump will try to stay in office if he loses the 2020 election? I don't, but at the same time, it would not totally shock me. If they weren't talking about cutlery, I have no idea what they were talking about. I'm completely in the dark. Jason says, hey, Steve, I'm going to feed your outrage engine for you. I'm going to protest the vote by actively luring people away from their polling place with a pop-up nude barbecue for no reason. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Just to make me mad? Come on, man, please. Jason, don't. Don't do that. You live in California, man. Don't do that. Don't do that. Actually, California's probably gonna go blue anyway. So, I mean, you're probably in the best state to pull some shit like that. So I don't care. Go for it. Whatever. Do whatever you want. Do whatever makes you happy. John Burns, another super chat. Democratic primaries. We don't count the votes. We count the delegates. General election. Democrats. Why don't we count the votes? Ironic. Yeah, I mean, ideally, the delegates and the votes would be, like whoever gets the most delegates would also have the most votes. So, I mean, hopefully it's not that much of a problem. But I mean, the delegates, I mean, it's only natural for people to if they lose, to want to say, well, we should have done it the other way, then we would have won. I mean, it's hypocritical. It's not consistent, but I mean, it's only natural that people would think that way. Dr. Babylon says, why do so many socialists conflate market economics with capitalism? I understand why capitalists do it. They're trying to justify their power, but why do socialists do it? I don't know. Maybe maybe they honestly just a lot of socialists are extremely well read and educated on economic systems, but maybe some of them just don't realize that there's a distinction. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have said, that like free markets and capitalism are not the same thing, are not inextricable, and we don't necessarily have to treat them as the same, but maybe they think there's some advantage to do it. Maybe they feel like it would be easier to sell getting rid of capitalism if they could focus on things about free markets that they consider unfair. I really don't know. 255 AD, will the 2024 election happen if Trump is reelected? God, I hope so. John Burns Super Chat says there was an election in 1864, so there will be an election this year and again in 2024. Why? There was a civil war in 1864. Yeah, I mean, historic. If we had a presidential election during the Civil War, it does seem a little unlikely to say that we wouldn't have one in 4 years if Trump was elected president. Although, I mean, I think the point of the question is, would Trump allow there to be an election in 2024? Like, would Trump by that point have consolidated his power to such an extent that he would be able to stop a regularly scheduled election? And I would certainly hope not. Yeah, Seal0626 says, it is so cartoonishly story-like that I almost completely sincerely expect Trump to prove his point about being able to shoot someone and not lose a single supporter. I mean, after the impeachment, like, I don't know. I mean, we're closer to that being a reality than I think a lot of people ever expected. I mean, that the impeachment was the political equivalent of that. The impeachment was weeks and weeks of, oh, he definitely committed multiple impeachable offenses, but it doesn't matter. We're going to let him off the hook anyway. I mean, that is the political equivalent of shooting someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and getting away with it. Like, that's what happened. So, all right. So I've been going for 90 minutes. I'm going to begin the long, laborious process of wrapping this up. So thank you all so much for joining me. To everyone in the live chat whose question, there's a super chat from David Appleman. Thanks, David. You got it in just under the wire. What % of super chats get eaten by the Google? I honestly don't know. I looked it up once and I can't remember what the percentage is. Google does take a share, but I can't remember exactly how big of a share Google takes. But Google does take a bite. Anyway, so thank you for the super chat. Thanks to everybody for the super chats that you all were kind enough to donate tonight. I do get a piece of them. I don't know how much. Another one from John Burns. John says, you honestly think that Trump is the only power-hungry member of the GOP? Seriously? Just Trump and no one else? Oh, no. It's the whole party. The whole party is shit. Trump is a symptom, not the disease. I'm completely on board. The Republican Party in general is a shit show and shouldn't be trusted. And there are probably quite a few Republicans who, in terms of attempting to consolidate power, would behave in just the same way Trump has. So I agree with you there completely. So anyway, now I'm going to wrap this up. So thank you all for the super chats. Thank you all for the questions. I appreciate all of you being with me. I want to draw your attention, as I always do, to the description of the video where there are some charity links. There are some friends of ours who need a helping hand, who are going through some struggles financially. If you can possibly afford to help any of them out, please do so. And if you can't afford to help them out, no shame in that. We all have troubles. We all have problems. But if you can't afford to help them out with a donation, at least consider sharing the links on your own social media and spreading the word and helping out some of our friends in their time of need. I also want to remind you that in addition to the YouTube thing, I also co-host a couple of podcasts with the great Jason Harding, who was in the live chat and trying to piss me off by saying that he doesn't watch Picard anymore and that he's going to siphon voters away with nude barbecues. I still love him. That's okay. He's like family to me. But we co-host the Let Me Listen podcast, or the Late Seating podcast, which is a movie review podcast where we take a fresh look at classic films and decide whether or not they deserve their reputations. And we also co-host The Ensign's Law, which is a Star Trek themed comedy podcast that people have asked about a couple times during the show, which I really super appreciate. So you can listen to all of those at letmelistenpodcast.com or through the links in the description. And also, if you enjoy what I do on this channel and you want to help me continue to do it, patreon.com/Steve Shives is the best way to do that. You can become a patron of this channel for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month or more gets you a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5 and also a Trek Actually video. But a patronage of any amount gives you the chance to ask questions ahead of time for this live stream. These Ask Away live streams are always done on Friday, Monday of the week when there is going to be an Ask Away live stream. I post a post on my Patreon page to ask people to submit their questions, and patrons of any amount can submit their questions ahead of time, and I will answer patron questions first thing on the show. So patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to help me keep doing this thing that I do on YouTube. Another super chat from John Burns. Thank you once again, John. John says, this right here replaces handshakes in the time of coronavirus. I'm 100% on board with that. Let's all do the Spock salute instead of shaking hands for our health, for our good health. Yes. And also wash your hands thoroughly, as Dead Vinny just said. So anyway, that's it, everybody. Thank you very much. Some Random Geek is reminding me to plug Social Justice Alchemy, which is on the Social Justice Alchemy YouTube channel every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern and whatever the hell time that is, wherever you live. So check out Social Justice Alchemy. I was just a guest on the show last week and had a great fucking time. So definitely watch that show. They're good people. That's it, everybody. I will be back in a couple weeks to do this again. Thank you all so much for the questions. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everything. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.